Welcome back to another week of Political Breakfast. We are so glad that you are here listening on WABE. I'm Lisa Rayam, and with me today, we're all here. Strategist Brian Robinson and Tharon Johnson. It is spring, guys. Spring has sprung, although it's a little dreary today, but spring is in the air, and I'm glad of that.
No, man, it was a great weekend. Tharon and I were at an event at Truist Park Sunday night, and it was the perfect weather.
How nice.
We had the cocktail hour there, kind of on the first and third baselines, and it was perfect weather because you could be in a suit without roasting your can off, but not too cold. I do want to point out that when Tharon and his wife showed up, that it was just picture perfect after we had the big DEI discussion last week at Spelman, that this was a majority white crowd here at this event. And when they walked up, it was me and all of the minorities at the event talking. Right? I was like, Johnsons, y'all going to love this. Look at this.
Well, to take our listeners into what really happened, no, 90% of that is correct. But no, the event, the gala that we went to is, yes, it's definitely predominantly white. But Brian, as he always does, tries to seek out black and brown people and use them as a focus group, Lisa. So we just happened to walk up and see him. So we did participate in a picture, but it was just a good crowd of folks. And we talked about a lot of different issues. I mean, education, public safety, of course, DEI. And surprisingly, it was a lot of conversations about sports teams in Atlanta. And I just kind of want to pivot for a second. And I don't do this a lot on this podcast, but shout out the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, I think they're on a 5 or 6 game winning streak. Last 7, 8 games, I had a chance to take my son Tyson to the game on Saturday.
Oh, pretty cool.
And so shout out to the Hawks. I know we talk a lot about the Falcons, the Dogs, Georgia Tech, women's basketball, golf, but definitely want to, hope the Hawks keep it up and make the playoffs.
Yeah, we have to start talking about the Hawks. They did good last season, didn't they? And it just kind of, towards the end of the season, it got kind of bad, but they did good. They did good last season.
They're a little banged up right now. Jalen Johnson is out, good all-star player, doing very well. Capello, their big center, is injured. He'll be back. But, yeah, I mean, I think they're on a good run, and they got a lot of young players that are doing very well.
All right, so here we are Monday, a few days after tort reform had its day under the Gold Dome. And we were chatting before we started recording here. And you two both say your phones have been ringing off the hook with I guess, reaction as to what happened here with tort reform, which is getting closer to becoming a reality here in Georgia.
Well, it is reality. I mean, basically, now we're just waiting on
signature.
Governor Kemp's signature. And they want to move fairly quickly, although I do think they're going to want to give a little bit of a heads up for a signing ceremony and make a really big deal out of it, because this was his signature issue, not just for 2025, but for his second term.
Right.
I think that there's understanding within the Kemp administration that a second-term governor entering his last year in office, his penultimate session, goes out there, goes hard, passes his big issue by 1 vote in the House and expends a lot of political capital on it, that you're now moving into lame duck territory. Attention begins to turn to who's next. The ability to do big things in 2026 is virtually non-existent. So they went all out, and they delivered something that is meaningful, something that will make a difference for Georgia businesses and Georgia consumers in the long run. And I'll tell you, I was a little bit shocked by the whole thing at just how emotional and tense and close this vote was. Tharon and I have been getting blown up by people on both sides. I don't understand a Republican argument against this legislation. I just don't get it. And I think that the Democrats' attacks on the 3 Democrats who voted for it, who all have good reasons for why they would support it, I think they're cringy to me to go after those folks. And we'll see on the Republican side if Governor Kemp keeps his promise to go after the Republicans who voted no. That was a big promise. I will fund a primary challenge against you. Does that change after winning? I mean, if he had lost the vote, then you are kind of motivated by rage and hurt, and embarrassment. But when you win, do you just want to take the win and move on and not spend more political capital and go through some dicey processes with House and Senate leadership who have been strong supporters of Governor Kemp. This is not a slam dunk issue. I mean, he made a promise. Does he keep it? Does it look weak if he doesn't keep it? Or does he keep it and create another division between some of the House and Senate members who he may need on other issues?
What you just described there sounds so Trump-esque, so Trump-like in terms of revenge and not like Governor Kemp. I don't know. What's your reaction to all this, Tharon?
No, look, I mean, I'll go backwards. I'll start with what B-Rob just talked about as far as the governor, keeping his promise to fund primary opponents to people who would vote against this bill. And it was bipartisan opposition. And I want to really stress that. And I think both parties made this issue political. Governor Kemp made it political because, as B-Rob just said, this was his big initiative. There was nothing more important coming out of his state of the state than this issue. Now, there's other things that he's very concerned about, like putting things in the budget. And, we talked about the Georgia prison systems. We talked about doing something around gun safety, but tort reform was a big issue. So I think that Brian hits on a good point. I mean, will he carry out that promise of threatening those folks? Because the folks who did stick with him, all right, and if he doesn't carry out the promise that he's going to primary those folks, they're going to be like, well, wait, hold on. You said that you were going to spend money to go against those folks, and I stood with you, Governor. So where are you on that? But Brian also brings up a good point that if he does that, then does that create more dissension, to your point, Lisa? So there's turmoil and there's reaction in the Republican Party as well, because the people who stood with the governor are waiting to see, hey, all these people who voted against you, Governor, will you carry it out? But the difference between what they're doing, and I'm segueing to the Democrats, is I do believe the same amount of frustration, the same amount of feeling of kind of betrayal, the same amount of political sort of positioning is happening in the Republican Party too. The difference is the three Democrats who voted in favor of the bill have just received the same amount of criticism, I'm sure, that's going on in the Republican Party. The difference is that it's actually been more dramatized by the media, and there's been some folks who have responded and just saying their disappointment that their caucus members did not stick with them. The House Democratic caucus took a position that they were going to oppose this bill. And quite frankly, they were pretty specific about that. I mean, any Democratic member you talk to in the House, they were like, no to tort reform, period. And then there was this conversation about amendments. And then even after the amendments, Lisa, there was still the Democratic caucus position, I believe, that, hey, you vote no. And so since that didn't happen, to me, I think that if people who were promoting, the people who were trying to oppose this bill, I think the same amount of criticism going towards the Democrats that voted for it needs to be going towards the same amount of Republicans who voted for it. But I would say this, since the vote, many of my close friends are trial lawyers. And they have called me over the weekend, one of whom I've known for over 40 years. This is a man who I grew up with in Athens, Georgia, who has made a living and has done tremendously well for his family, being a lawyer, in his words, that fight for the people. And so, Lisa, when this became a Democrat versus Republicans, Democrat versus Brian Kemp issue, and then Republicans being sort of threatened that if they don't do the right thing, and therefore they're going to be retaliated against the governor, it should have probably never been a Democratic versus Republican issue. What it really is that it's trial lawyers, it's mothers against drunk driving, it's sex traffic victims, it's human trafficking victims, all the people who felt like this bill would negatively impact them, whether it's a business, personal, versus big insurance companies, but also business, small, some large, but also doctors, physicians, farmers, developers. I mean, you can go down the list, and Brian, knows a lot of these different groups. If I left some out, let me know. And so really it was about, will something be done? And the bill is not perfect. And even some Republicans have said that it's not perfect, right? And Democrats have definitely criticized it. So I just think that, Lisa, I understand both sides. I really do. I truly feel that the trial lawyers felt like this was attacking their livelihood. This is attacking their business. And some of these trial lawyers reminded me that not only are they not just lawyers, they run businesses too. And they just felt like it was unnecessary. You had some tort reform in place already. Why would you go this far? But it also was a politicalization of it between like, okay, are the Democrats going to be able to stop Governor Kemp? And more importantly, what was Governor Kemp willing to do? How far was he going to go to get this passed? And the lieutenant governor, the speaker, everybody did this. So I'll close with this. I just think that Democrats don't want to hear this right now, but I'm going to say it. We got to win in 2026. And the way we win in 2026 is expanding our coalition. Yes, a big part of our coalition are people who are trial lawyers. And trust me, they've spent a lot of money supporting Democrats, and we thank them for that. But they also spend a lot of money supporting Republicans, too. Lisa, we need pro-business people. We need small business people. We need people who are against tort reform, because that's the type of thing that we got to keep our eyes on the prize. And I do think that while these three members of the Democratic Party, one woman, two men, can defend themselves, right? They made that vote. They're going to have to explain it to their constituents. They're going to have to explain it to their party. And they are going to suffer from it, right? Because there's a group of people out here that are very upset with them. But we got to keep our eyes on the prize in 2026. And we got to find some other issues that we can win on. Democrats can take credit for it in this session and next session, and definitely going into 2026. And I know that's very hard for us to go through right now. And I'm not diluting what's happening. Trust me, I've heard it from trial lawyers. Like many of my closest friends, 40 years, they went at me for 45 minutes. I didn't say a word, but then we said, hey, we're going to go watch March Madness together on Friday because we're friends. Mm-hmm. But I would be disingenuous, Lisa, if I did not tell you that there's excitement from some folks, and then there's some disappointment. And then the last thing is that Democrats, we got to figure this out. Right? Tort reform is very important. Don't get me wrong. It is a key issue that we need to discuss in Georgia. But there are other issues as well that I think Democrats can position ourselves on to show strength, to show leadership along with tort reform. Because I think that what they did, they definitely made people pay attention to it. And they made people kind of, hear a contrast view of it. But Governor Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, Speaker Burns, Kennedy in the Senate, Bruchette in the House, Bureau, correct me if I'm missing somebody, Georgia Chamber, Metro Chamber of Commerce, small businesses, they all came together and they got a win, but it was close. Mm-hmm. And I just think that Democrats, not all of them are anti-big business either. They're not anti-small business, but they took a caucus position, and all but three of them honored that position.
A couple of things here that I want to follow up on. One, trial attorneys feel like their livelihood is under attack. Well, then they should have live understanding for the vote of Democratic State Representative and Dr. Michelle Al, who I believe is from Johns Creek. Now, Michelle Al has been a reliable partisan Democrat on issue after issue. But on this particular issue, she could not vote no and go back to work because she would have been voting against the interest of her own profession. This is a part-time legislature. And these votes have real world consequences. And in her profession, the opinion is universal that we have a broken system. I saw a quote from her earlier this year that Georgia's legal climate is hostile toward doctors and the practice of medicine, which makes it difficult to recruit the number of healthcare providers that we need in this state. So for her, it's very personal. And look, I'm sure she would rather give up her $20,000 a year state rep job because some Democrats primary her over this issue than to give up her career as a medical professional because one pays a lot more than the other. So for her, I think it was a fairly easy decision. For Mac Jackson from Sandersville, he's got big Republican supporters down there, the tar buttons who are in the one branch is in the trucking business, one branch is in the train business, the railroad business. And they were strong supporters of this issue. I did a news conference with Charles Tarbutton a couple of weeks ago. So Mac was listening to his constituents there. I'm not sure what Carl Gilliard's position resulted from, but I think he thought it was just the right thing to do. I think he plans on retiring maybe after this term, so I didn't feel the political pressure. But Tharon hit on something really important there that I want to circle back to. The trial attorneys are major campaign donors in this state, and they have defended their interest on both sides. They are major donors to both parties, which is smart. They're supporting Democrats because Democrats are more likely to support their issues. They're supporting Republicans because Republicans are the majority, and they've got to have a seat at that table. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, as Johnny Addison used to say. They've done a really good job on that. I would imagine they're going to remove some of that support from Republicans in the 26th cycle. So business community, hear me. The Republicans in the General Assembly stood up for you. They stood up for consumers and for the future of Georgia businesses. We have got in the business community to do what the trial attorneys do. You've got to step up from the mom and pops to big business and make sure the Republicans get the funds that they're going to lose from the trial attorneys for doing the right thing on this. Write a check to the House Republican caucus. Write a check to the Senate Republican caucus. The House is more important because that's the front lines. The Senate's pretty safe as far as how it's drawn to maintain a Republican majority. The House is where the action is at. And if you care about these policies, these pro-business policies, everybody's got to step up and say thank you for taking a strong stand, a courageous stand. We're seeing how courageous it was when you're looking at the blowback, that pushing this forward was good for the state, and we need to go and support those members who supported it. I think that's hugely important. Business communities got to stand up and do the right thing on that.
Lisa, if I can close this out real quick, and I have to do this because, one of the things about this podcast, we try to give different views, right? And so let me also try to do my best to articulate what not just trial lawyers, but just people in general. Look, there are folks out here right now that have bad things happen to them. We know car wrecks. People have a doctor who he or she may do something really bad to them. And this was an argument about being for people's our ability to use the judicial system, to have a judge, trial by jury, to basically be able to go to court and and have the proper representation, right? And what I've heard a lot from folks is that, and we had to tell this, did it work in Florida? Well, there's contrasting views. Some people say it did work in Florida, right? But some folks are saying, well, maybe, it didn't work as well because you had the speaker down there come back and say, hey, you guys told us that insurance rates were going to be lowered. We haven't really seen that really happen in its totality, but there have been some lowering of insurance rates. And so I think the thing that I keep going back to is the reason you see this outrage is because, not because trial attorney, but there are a lot of victims. I mean, to me, what really changed the game is when you heard these testimonies from people who have experienced sex trafficking and human trafficking. And the question is, how do you hold that hotel, that real estate developer, whomever, accountable, right? But at the same time, give that developer, that business owner a fair shot. And so, again, I don't want this. I didn't want to really talk a whole lot about it because it's really divided people like me personally who have friends on the other side. But I also understand it being married to a physician who definitely leans more towards something being done. I mean, I don't want to misrepresent her, but I think she would stand on business to say that. But as Democrats, we cannot neglect the fact that there are going to be people who don't understand this and people who feel like people will be left out. And it was a conversation about businesses stepping up and doing what they had to do. And they should be commended. I mean, it was big business. It was small business. It was farmers. It was agriculture. But Lisa, I just think that this is just such an emotional time that we're in our country. And anything that comes down to one vote, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, B. Rob, it wasn't supposed to be that close. And that's why I keep trying to remind the Democrats.
I don't know.
But
I can't hear. I was shocked by how close. I mean, I really thought it was going to be a bigger margin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But what I'm saying, so what I think went into that is that you had some courageous Republicans, Lisa, stand up to the governor, which we got to wait and see if they're going to pay for that. And you also had some Democrats who were courageous and stayed with the caucus, and they went against some of their maybe business owners and others. But you had these three who said, we're going to vote for it. And then you also had a member of the state Senate, Manuel Jones, let's not forget him, who's a car dealer, who's been in business for 30 years, was defiant. He voted for it the first time.
A lot of people, putting themselves in precarious situations.
And then he voted for it the second time. And then Senator Harbison, who's a great man, who's represented his district very well for a long time, voted for it in the Senate. So, I don't want to mention those two individuals' names to kind of direct the sort of blowback to them, but Michelle Ah is definitely getting a lot of criticism from her caucus, and she's getting attacked. And I think she's just going to have to just get through it because I think she made that decision. Brian pointed out some points that I didn't know. We will be talking about this issue. And then as we do on this podcast, will tort reform do everything that the people who voted for it said it was going to do a year from now, 2 years from now? Or were the critics, most of them Democrats, not all, some Republicans, right, B-Rob, that's fair, that had concerns about it and then vote against it, were they right? I think that's what we got to look. Where are we going to be a year 2 years from now when this vote, signed, and kind of see where we are as a state?
Yeah, let's say 2 years. You got to give it time to work its way through the system.
2 years,
right?
that's fair. I mean, 4 to 2 years.
Yeah, it's not even signed into law yet. So give it some time to see, does it stabilize insurance prices? I don't think it's fair to say you got to lower insurance prices because that's just not how the economy works. That's deflation, and that's bad. But if we can stabilize it, that's pretty good. And we'd love to see some examples of lower prices, certainly if that's possible. I do want to point out that the job back home issue wasn't just for Democrats like Michelle Au. Vance Smith from Harris County was the president and CEO of the Harris County Chamber of Commerce, and he was fired as soon as the bill was passed and sent to the governor's desk because he was a Republican no vote on it. And so he took a stand there that was contrary to his employer, and he no longer has an employer. So the hatchets are flying on both sides, and it shows how important it is to the different interest groups on this issue. And look, that Harris County area right next to Columbus, it's probably going to be an issue for Senator Harbison too. Lots of big name trial attorneys down there in Columbus who spend a lot of money on donating to campaigns, big names that are concentrated in that area. And I'm sure that played some role in Vance's decision. But I agree with Tharon. The proof will be in the pudding. We saw Speaker Burns come out as soon as it passed by one vote and said, hey, insurance companies, you said this was our legal climb was driving up prices. Yeah. We're watching you now. And he's not a lame duck. He's going to be around for a few more years. So it's not going to be Kemp's issue. It's going to be the Republican legislators' issue moving forward. So
yeah, it'll be watched closely for sure. Absolutely. That's for sure. You mentioned the 2026 elections and how important it is for the Democratic Party in particular, Tharon. And over the weekend, Senator Jon Ossoff kicked off his reelection campaign, and he was pretty explosive in his speak.
They are literally the elites they pretend to hate. The president is not at his palace in Florida thinking about whether you can afford daycare for your daughter or how to stop insurance companies from denying your claim or anything that matters to our daily lives. When is the last time you even heard Donald Trump talk about health care?
What were your thoughts on that?
Well, shout out to Senator Ossoff and his team. Did a wonderful job of getting, Democratic operatives, people who have been supportive of him for a long time in a room. He did a clutch, and then the senator was there, and he got a chance to meet my oldest son, Tyson, and they did a video, and he talked to Tyson, and Tyson remembered that, he wrote a handwritten letter to myself in China when he was born, and, he has a 3-year-old daughter. So, it was just wonderful to see the senator just really being personable, and this clutch was really good because it was at an event off Memorial Drive, and it was over pretty much max to capacity. It was over 2,000 folks. And, he had 4 people speak, talking about different issues around veterans and the need for more veterans affairs. He had a Black woman who talked about maternal mortality and 2 other speakers who talked about the economy and also talked about what Senator Ossoff has done for them personally. But the one thing that I really was struck by is that, some people have come out and talked about, why is he doing this event? Republicans are trying to make it a thing about this being Ossoff's campaign lunch. And the campaign was very quick to come out and say this wasn't, quote unquote, his lunch, but this was an opportunity for him to let people gather in a venue and to just hear an alternative voice of what we've been hearing out of Washington. And I thought the remarks were very, very bipartisan. He talked about how he's bringing the state together, but there were some shots at Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and some of the things that are going on. So Senator Warnock spoke before Senator Ossoff came out. Of course, Warnock, he killed it. He was clean, had his Lisa, he was kind of like black on black, blue on blue. But, the pastor came out and really, to me, always does a good job of kind of talking about what's at stake for Georgians. But to me, this event was about speaking in the moment and showing that Georgians are unhappy. And you could see that with some of the applauses when Senator Ossoff talked about some of the things that he's working hard to work against. And then I think that, the venue to me was an intimate venue where it was very set up where he can really touch with the crowd. But I think that the senator realizes that he's got to get out here sooner than later to really do 2 things. One, to make sure that if anybody's thinking about running against him, right, he needs to show strength and show that he is the party's nominee and we should rock with him and that should happen. And the second thing is whether it's Governor Brian Kemp or someone else, use this time right now while you have the power of incumbency and making sure that the bipartisan record that you now have a sort of chance to promote. Because once you get into a back head to head, the Republicans are going to say all these bad things about him, but really stressing that how he's working for all Georgians. And it also shows that his organization is intact. I mean, they pulled this rally together pretty quickly, and it was just a really good turnout.
I heard a lot of very populist themes in the comments. I certainly heard a lot of attacks on the Trump administration and the direction the country is going. And that really that messaging that we saw from Senator Ossoff on Saturday falls in line with what I was saying at the Spelman audience last week, that what unites Democrats is opposition to Donald Trump. That's not unusual, but it is certainly that plus the power of 10 right now. You certainly see Democrats very scared, very mobilized, very energized. And, when you saw and heard the crowd responses, it was the underlying thematic was fighting President Trump. And so I think that's going to be the safest route for Senator Ossoff to move forward, is to make his campaign about Donald Trump. He is the motivating factor. He is in American politics. The Spelman crowd didn't like my metaphor, but it was just a metaphor. That's all it is, that he is the sun around which American politics orbits. What I'm saying, you may not like calling him the sun. That maybe you think that's too positive, but my point is, it orbits around him. He sets the agenda for Republicans, and he sets the agenda for Democrats by lining them up in opposition to it. So that is the best route for Senator Ossoff to take. And some of this stuff in 2026 is out of his control. He cannot control the political environment by himself just in Georgia. His chances will hinge on a couple of things. One, who the Republicans nominate. If he's up against Governor Kemp, his chances are very, very poor. We already know that Kemp's got consistent and big leads on Ossoff in polling. But Kemp doesn't seem too inclined to do it. And the second tier are some very fine Republicans leaders who have every right and have a great reason to run, but they don't have the name ID or the juice that Governor Kemp has. And so it's going to be a much more competitive race for Ossoff if it's not Governor Kemp. Third, the political environment nationally. If Trump's approval ratings are good, Ossoff's chances are very poor. If Trump's approval ratings are bad in Georgia, Ossoff's chances are really good. So a lot of those things he can't control. We do know he's going to have plenty of money. We also know the Republican is going to have plenty of money, whoever that nominee is, because we're going to see millions, hundreds of millions pour in, because for Republicans, this is the number one pickup opportunity. For Democrats, it is a foothold in the Deep South, which they don't really have anywhere else besides in Georgia. So it's symbolically very important for them to keep it. And for many Democrats who look at the broader picture, you're looking at somebody running for his second term who is still in his 30s, someone who is an important face for Democrats when the most well-known Democrats in power today are Nancy Pelosi in her 80s, Chuck Schumer in his late 70s. Those are some of the big I know Hakeem Jeffries is the minority leader, but Pelosi is still what many people associate with House Democrats. Schumer's in the Senate. It's no longer the face of a 40-something-year-old Barack Obama, young and vibrant and full of energy. Ossoff is an important face for Democrats, and I think that's something that they will take into consideration when they're doling out money. In order to get the money, though, Ossoff has got to keep it close. The Democrats will cut ties if he's, potentially 5 to 10 points down on the Republican nominee.
It almost seems like they're in the path ahead for an incumbent is kind of grim. If the way that Brian just described it, is he in that bad of shape at this point? Do you think?
So, Lisa, what I saw on Saturday was this. It was reminiscent of the 2006, 2007 Ossoff that I, met as a young organizer. And he did a clutch. And I want to go back to this clutch. I mean, people had access to him. Second, let's go to it. Jewish people, right? It was a diverse audience. There's always been this sort of notion that all these Jewish folks are against Jon Ossoff because of maybe one vote, right? And the senator reminded me that he's voted 96% of the time with the Jewish community. And I'm not excluding those Jewish leaders who are very upset with him about this one vote. And he's met with them. I think he's still trying to heal that relationship. And I know he came on Morning Edition after the article came out about New York Times and Jewish leaders not supporting him. And I thought that was a really good interview that you guys conducted, right? Because for him to come on Morning Edition to talk about it, I mean, you asked him some tough questions and he answered it. But the Jewish members that I saw in the audience, Asian members, Hispanic, African-American people, but, Jewish folks, were very, very intentional about showing that they're sticking with them. And then the third thing, Lisa, is to push back on, to get to your question. No, what you heard from Jon Ossoff was a bipartisan message about how he's in the U.S. Senate working with Republicans that will work with him to bring resources not only to the Atlanta metro area, but to talk about what he's done in South Georgia, what he's done in North Georgia, what he's doing to work with the different federal departments to strengthen them. And I'll just be honest with you, it was very Obama, Kennedy, like in his sort of delivery. No, I think he's fine. I think he is running as an incumbent who really is proud of his record, Lisa. So no, he is not going to receive this referendum and in this sort of, like you said, grim picture that B-Rob tried to portray. Now, are the polling numbers concerning? Yeah. I mean, but we got a long time. We got a long, long time before November next year. But he needed to do this rally. It was an opportunity for people to come and hear an alternative voice, people to vent and really express their frustration. And many of the listeners of this podcast, Lisa, I mean, young, older people were coming up and they were happy to actually see me there. And I know B-Rob goes to rallies too, but they also know they're like, we're there and we're like feeling the energy in the room. And I think that people left that rally on Saturday, not only fired up about Jon and him being our senior senator, but more so fired up. They're like, okay, guys, you know what? We got somebody in Washington that at least is thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Is like, this can't be happening. Like, this is just chaos. But more importantly, what is he going to do to try to fix it? And, he wanted to basically, sort of give people that opportunity. And in the name of the rally, which I thought was interesting, I want to go back and look at it, was Rallying for Our Republic. And I thought that, branding wise, Rally for Our Republic was a really, really good way to really bring everyone together for that rally.
It's going to be very similar to my birthday thematic, Rallying for Robinson Republic.
There you go.
The name of my business.
To be fair, Brian, you can mark this date too, March 24th. So if it does turn out to be as grim as you say, you could say, I told you so on March 24th.
Yeah, no, I feel like right? I hedged my bets there. I was like, a lot of it's going to depend on the political environment.
And
that's beyond his control.
Changing, right? Which is ever changing.
And, look, he has made a play for the middle. And there's a couple of votes here and there where he's done things where he's voted with the Republicans over the Democrats. And then there are areas where he has voted against the middle, like when he voted against the girls' sports issue in very recent memory. He divided his coalition somewhat with his vote that the pro-Israeli community in this country saw as anti-Israel. So he is navigating rocky waters every vote like this, where he has to make a decision between alienating his base or alienating the deciders in the middle, the deciders who, in shorthand parlance, Kemp Warnock voters, as an example of who these people are. So he's got to think about Kemp Warnock, and he's got to think about his base. Yeah. And he's got to choose between them.
He had his sleeves rolled up, Lisa. He had the boots on, those fitted kind of tailored jeans. Hair was just immaculate. And I don't think he had nose. I don't even think he had, we don't have that much hair, Brian. We had to talk about other people's hair, yeah. But by the way, we were looking at old pictures of us from 10 years ago. And I must say, bro, I've been bald for a long time. I've been bald for a very long time, Lisa. But Brian and John Pruitt had a full head of hair,
and it was dark.
And it was dark. So Brian, you've endured some challenging moments, my brother. You have the hair color to show for it. But no, Lisa, I'm telling you, Ossoff, look, he ain't playing. I mean, again, the conversation I had with him brief, I didn't want to bother him, but he's like, no, bring your son in here. I want to talk to him. I think he is ready. And look, we can get into this later on. I don't want to put him out there too far, but it was very Obama-esque. Like it had some tones in his speech, some words that he used. He speaks in complete sentences all the time, even when you talk to him one-on-one. But I saw a guy that's honestly not going to back down. And let's not forget, this is the same guy who beat David Perdue. He took it to David Perdue. And when David Perdue wouldn't debate him, the second time, right, berailed me. And that first kind of interaction between him, Jon has this side in him where he can, if you challenge him, you push back on him, and he'll fight back. So I think that his team is doing a good job of just kind of, I agree with Brian. It's rocky times right now, right? You got to make sure you don't get too far out there. Don't stay hidden too long. But I think that this rally was a good sort of like teaser of what's more to come from this campaign.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to get out of here. March Madness. We didn't talk about that. The Sweet 16. They've been decided. You all watching that? You've got a team that you're picking to win it all. I'm going with Duke. I'm going with
two
Duke.
brackets. I picked one because Obama went with Duke, so I went with Duke. You got to follow BO. And then in my other bracket, I picked Alabama. But the person who just, at least I know you follow it because you like college basketball. When Clemson lost, it was just, bad. But shout out to the Arkansas Razorbacks. I have a good friend, Charles McAdoo. He's from Little Rock, Arkansas. His mayor there, Frank Scott. All these Arkansas fans are just, lit right now. They texting. They all on Facebook.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Shout out to Calipari. It's his first year coming back. And then St. John let me down. I had them going a little further. Rick Pitino. But yeah, but what about you, B. Rob? That's my bracket so far. So I'm still in the money, Lisa. I'm still in the money on my two brackets.
So I'm a Georgia Bulldogs fan, so I don't care too much about college basketball, right? It would just be too frustrating.
I didn't take them to beat Gonzaga.
Yeah.
No. But the thing is, we're a better team. We got smoked, and so that quite literally was the last full NCAA game I watched. I did see some of the Auburn game over the weekend. Yeah. Auburn's looking good too. They could make a good run. Yeah. I'll say I am a Georgia fan, but it is good to see the SEC doing decently. And we lost some early, but still enough in the game. So go SEC.
All right, y'all have a good day, a good week, and we'll do it again next week.
Great show. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lisa.